Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar. I am Chloe Tetro. I'm the coaching lead here with Ready Care. For this morning, we're going to touch on the subject of self-compassion. So it's going to be a bit of an introduction. A lot of people think of compassion and maybe mix it up with sympathy, empathy. So we're going to have a look at what it is and how, instead of just thinking of it as a nice to have and a soft skill, we're going to have a look at how it directly impacts our ability to experience our day-to-day in the best way that we can, but also direct us towards our goals. So it's looking at self-compassion as a tool for well-being and as a tool to actually move you to where you'd like to go. So we'll just get cracking in, and for today we'll actually look at how it works in the brain versus criticism as well, because an awful lot of the time, for those of us that may be prone to self-criticism, I'm going to really give a compare and contrast as to how both of these approaches to, slipping up, being a human, how these impact. So let's get stuck into the criticism versus compassion and really look at the science involved in it. What's happening under the hood, as I say. So compassion involves recognizing suffering, so be that of others or ourselves, and the decided action to alleviate it. Self-compassion specifically is about offering ourselves the same kindness we would extend to other people, usually a lot easier. On a neurological level, then, self-compassion and self-criticism activate totally different systems in the brain, which will lead to totally radically different outcomes. So when we engage in self-compassion, firstly, areas like the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex light up. Now, they're regions linked to emotional awareness and regulation. These areas are responsible for calming the amygdala, which is the brain's fear center, which controls that big stress response or anxiety response that can happen. So by activating the soothing system, excuse me, self-compassion creates feelings of safety, reduces stress, and promotes recovery from stressful periods, recovery from anxiety, and recovery from a wobble, a little wobble that we might have. So when we look at the contrast side of it, then when we berate ourselves, tell ourselves, I'm the worst person in the world, why can't I just stick to anything? This is just like what my mother said, or this, that, and the other thing. The brain activates threat defense system naturally enough because we're coming in with all the punches and being highly threatening to ourselves, and this increases the activity in the amygdala and triggers the fight or flight response. So this then will flood the body with cortisol and adrenaline, which will lead to chronic stress over time. If you think about it, you have an inbuilt stressor constantly feeding that amygdala with those thoughts, those thoughts that become emotions, those emotions that become patterns and behaviors, and they will really color your day-to-day experience of your life. Now, studies would show that elevated cortisol levels contribute to issues like chronic anxiety, depression, and also impaired immune function. Now, how an awful lot of people will come to know cortisol as the stress hormone. We do need it for certain things in the body, but when it is in a chronically elevated state, it can show itself in lots of different ways that impact cardiovascular health, immune function, difficulty losing weight, particularly around the midsection, and hormones. Study from Stanford University found that self-criticism significantly raises cortisol levels, making it harder to manage stress effectively. So when we look at the contrast again, research by Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer, Germer, will show that self-compassion then, on the other hand, leads to lower cortisol levels, increased heart rate, variability, which is a good thing. And it's a marker of a good emotional regulation as well. So if you're somebody that finds your stress levels a little bit all over the place, your anxiety a little all over the place, and you find yourself being quite reactive. I mean, I've been there myself. I can catch my my jumper on a door handle, and suddenly I'm yelling at a door handle, going, "God, if my clients could see me now!" If you find yourself being one of these people that suffers with some of these, and that can recognize that you do have a tendency to berate yourself, that you do have a tendency towards very critical self-talk, just take note, I suppose. Take note and see what you make of the rest of the talk, and how to bring that a little bit into your life. So neuroscientist Tanya Singer, she's a good lady to look up if you're interested in this. Her work demonstrates that compassion training activates the reward center as well. Now, the reward center is the part that is implemented in good behavior and addictions. So what is the right, I couldn't think of a word there on the fly for the opposite of addictions. That's positive addictions, things you like to do often. Reward center basically is implemented in that. So reinforcing positive behaviors and creating lasting emotional resilience becomes a lot easier when your reward center is activated. When the reward center is activated, we basically want to repeat the thing that we just did because it made us feel good. We got a reward from it. And really we're like very basic creatures, press the button, get a reward. I'll press the button again. So over time, self-compassion becomes a more sustainable motivator for change than criticism, which will lead to stress, emotional burnout, yelling at door handles, and maybe your partner, your coworker, or people that don't deserve it, or yourself, which is equally as bad. So let's look at the experiential aspect of things. And if you guys have any questions at any point, just pop them in the comment section. I'll be glad to answer them. So excuse me, compassion lies at the heart of experiential, day-to-day, I suppose you'd call it this, the psychology of everyday living, and emphasizes how our lived experience shape our well-being. And for those of you that tune in or watch back on any of my videos, you know that a big central concern of mine where clients are concerned, and where anybody in my life really, is what is your day-to-day experience like? And how can you feel better in that? Because really our day-to-day experiences are all we have, and they add up to being the sum of our lives, really. So making sure that there's a promotion of more well-being in those is absolutely vital. So one of the most significant ways excuse me, self-compassion affects daily life is through that regulation of the emotional responses that I mentioned a while ago, particularly in moments of heightened stress, or that we covered, or in moments of perceived failures. So if you imagine that you've missed a deadline, you've broken a personal commitment, a professional commitment, whatever it may be. With self-criticism, the brain is going to go absolutely interstellar, and it'll enter this kind of heightened state of stress, which then impairs your cognitive function and your emotional regulation. So when we're really, really stressed, right, I'm using my hands here for a purpose, I'm not just having a wave about, though I do that as well. When we are relaxed, right, we're able to think laterally. When we're stressed, we get focused vision, literally, but we also get cognitive focus. So whatever is in front of us, that's the thing that needs our entire focus. Now, that's good in a positive stressor environment. You're trying to reach a deadline and you're like, I'm doing focused work. This is all I'm doing. You get the blinkers. Now, the blinkers aren't as helpful when they stop you from seeing the larger picture, and when they stop you from seeing the interrelational relationship. I get my little cognitive poofs once in a while myself. They stop you from seeing how your direct actions are influencing others, and how your direct actions are influencing you when you zoom out and see it as a bigger picture. Self-critical people are more likely to ruminate, constantly feed themselves with the fuel to cause stress and anxiety. And that prolongs negative emotional states. And that leads to feelings of helplessness, because you feel absolutely powerless and you constantly have a little bully in your head. You constantly have a fairly nasty version of yourself that's probably speaking in the voices of somebody that was nasty to you in the past, that you've gone, I'm going to store this in my head and take it on and speak to myself in that way, because that's how humans navigate these problems. So it will enhance your feelings of helplessness, and it will diminish or lessen your feelings of self-worth, because you basically have a little mini you saying you're worthless. You know, how dare you have missed a deadline? You are absolutely worthless. Your entire value as a human being has been cut because you made a mistake. How dare you? According to research from psychologist Paul Gilbert, self-criticism activates the brain's threat system, like we've talked about, and that keeps people stuck in cycles of shame and self-sabotage, and shame and self-sabotage. And that pendulum swings and swings and swings, because essentially, and again, I repeat myself in these sessions, but essentially, you are who you believe yourself to be. If you believe that you're exceedingly incapable of completing a task, the odds are your whole system's going to come on board to try and prove you right. If you believe yourself incredibly capable of completing a task, your whole system's going to come on board and try to prove you right. So it's extremely vital that the information that we feed ourselves trickles down and nourishes our thought patterns and our behaviors, and to have awareness of that. Now, self-compassion disrupts this cycle totally. When we acknowledge our mistakes with a degree of kindness, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's the part of the nervous system which actually promotes calm and emotional balance. I always think it's funny that the sympathetic nervous system is the one that gets us up into a tizzy, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is a very big mouthful, that's the one that promotes calm and emotional balance. You'd think it'd be the other way around, but so that creates a space for reflection and learning. Because remember, when we're stressed and when we have the mini-me stressing ourselves out, you get a focused, cognitive way of looking at the world, including yourself, others, and the whole world, everything, the universe is just this. So there's very, very little space for other parts of your brain and your being, because I talk a lot about brain, but also parts of you that aren't your brain, your body, your somatic knowledge, your emotions. There's no space for them to think laterally, to go into self-reflective spaces, to go into learning, okay, what happened there? Oh, jeepers, yes, I did kind of jump down that person's throat for asking how I was. I can kind of see, etc. So that research shows that individuals that practice self-compassion experience significantly lower levels of anxiety and depression, are more likely to bounce back from setbacks. And it kind of stands to reason. When you hear it said out loud, you kind of think, yeah, it does make sense. But I'm different. I have to have things perfect. It's grand for everybody else, but for me, no. So when you practice that self-compassion, it can be just as simple as stopping and going, oh yeah, remember that talk that I listened to? Maybe this is what's happening. So acknowledging that discomfort, speaking to yourself kindly, acknowledging that you wanted things to be a certain way. You had a specific standard for yourself that you didn't quite meet. Right? That's your reality. Now, what is the meaning making that starts to get interwoven into this? Is it, I've made a mistake, therefore I'm worthless. I've made a mistake, therefore I will continue to always make mistakes. We're very prone to drama as human beings, or is it a case of, yeah, you spilled the milk, it's not the end of the world. And like I call this talk how you speak to, a friend. And a friend is all well and good, but I usually like to think like we're operating from really young parts when we go into that, terrible, I'm unlovable because I missed a deadline. That's a very young part of us. So I like to encourage, if you can think of a picture of yourself at 5 years old or 6 years old or 4 years old, if you have a photograph somewhere, some people like to put them on the desk. I actually think that's a great idea. Or somewhere that you can see it, because essentially that's who you're berating. You're like, you're good for nothing. You're absolutely void of value. You will never learn anything. This is just like all the other times that you messed up, and just really go, whoa, that feels really wrong to do. Because essentially, as I say in other talks, we're just those tiny humans operating adult machinery, like in Men in Black, where the face reveals and it's this tiny little alien operating the machinery. Even really, really small actions, like placing a hand on your heart, taking a few deep breaths, that will activate the soothing system and shift your mental state from reactive to receptive. Now, remember, we have a tendency to just view things through our experience. And oftentimes, even the word compassion, particularly for I don't want to go down the gender stereotype, but particularly with men, sometimes we'll see it as, it's a soft skill in the work environment. It can be a soft skill. Or some women, it can be seen as, no, that's a nice to have, but I like to get things done. But really, it's not just an experiential aspect, even though that in itself is really good enough, but it's also a mechanistic approach to getting all of the systems of your brain, nervous system, all of the different component parts of your body to mechanistically play ball with you and not fight you and go, why are you being mean to us? We're going to shut down, go, oh. So essentially it plays lots of different roles. Now, how does it impact? Well, how does it impact? Let's have a look at how compassion, or the lack of it, impacts us on a day-to-day basis. I'll run through this fairly quickly because I've touched on it and I don't want to be flogging any horse. So self-criticism when faced with mistakes or failures doesn't just make us feel bad, which in itself is enough. It sets off a cascade of negative psychological effects. It lowers your self-esteem, it erodes confidence, it increases the likelihood of mental health issues like depression and anxiety. When we berate ourselves, we reinforce the brain's negative bias, making us more likely to fixate on failures rather than focus on growth. Now, the brain naturally has a tendency to gravitate towards what's called negative bias. It's looking for things that are wrong, because as a being, your unconscious parts of your being are trying to protect you on a constant basis. So if you kind of picture neo paleo caveman times caveman times, and just think this very vulnerable skin and flesh creature is out in the wilds with predators, this, that, and the other thing. This is what we've evolved from. It just so happens that the predators of our time are emails coming in that we go, what is this? But essentially, your body reacts in similar ways. It's scanning for negative things. It's scanning for danger. It's scanning for ways to protect yourself. So the negative cognitive bias also is how we view ourselves. So we have a tendency to fixate on things we've done wrong rather than things we've done well. Apart from like the odd person out there who's just totally oblivious to that whole negative brain bias. And you know what? It might be working for them. So research shows that people who are highly self-critical often struggle with motivation, not because they don't want to succeed, but because the pressure and stress caused by themselves, caused by self-criticism, drains their emotional resources. It's like trying to ride a bike, but you keep putting a bar in the spokes of the wheels and go, why can't I ride this bike? God, I can't do anything right. So there's more of a likelihood that Self-critical people are less likely to pursue goals after a setback because they feel totally demoralized, and they've placed a meaning on it that is not just about the external event, but about who they are at the fundamental core of their being, which is an awful lot of pressure to place on any single event in space or time. It's like whatever you do in this one moment will dictate the core aspect and essence of your soul as a person. Whereas on the other hand, like just on that, it makes sense that we would want to avoid that because that is spiritually torturous. So it makes sense that if we experience that setback, we activate our whole internal system to go, fool be damned, you are terrible in every way. We will try to avoid scenarios that make us feel like that again. And we naturally will. And you can find sometimes that part of you wants to do something, but the other part doesn't. If you're someone that has a goal that they're like, I really want to do this, but for whatever reason, I don't really seem to be able to get myself in the groove of it, I'm self-sabotaging, I'm stopping myself in my own tracks, it's very likely that you are somebody prone to self-criticism. And what's happening there is your being is trying to find ways to not do the thing because they've associated it with, I'm going to feel terrible. I'm going to make myself feel terrible when I do that. So I'm good. Thank you very much. Whereas on the flip side, self-compassionate individuals are more likely to persist. They view challenges as opportunities for growth and achieve better outcomes overall because not everything is a knife edge. Things are just learning opportunities. You know, you're well able to go, oh yeah, I did totally miss that deadline. Do you know what it is? I forgot to put in my calendar. I'm just going to leave a note next to my computer that I can see that says put things in calendar. Now, whether I look at the note, that's another story. One practical exercise to shift from criticism to compassion is reframing self-talk. Self-talk is exceedingly important. And if you're interested in how self-talk actually wires your brain differently, and wires your behaviors, wires your habits, wires all of these differently. Have a look through some of our archives and you'll be able to see a talk more in depth on that. So ask yourself, what would I say to a close friend, loved one, or the 4-year-old, 5-year-old version of myself that I'm looking at on the desk and I look very, very cute? Direct that same kindness towards yourself and just really do. And if you're somebody who's allergic to doing that, just try it. Try it for a week and see how much better you feel. So this approach is supported by research from Kristin Neff, that psychologist I mentioned, and has been shown to reduce shame overall. And I should do a talk on shame because it is an absolute massive topic. But it reduces shame, self-compassion does, and increases motivation, which will enable better long-term progress. A lot of people will say, oh, my motivation's run out. I've run out of motivation. You know, motivation is not like this. It's not like a hair color. You know, you're not born with it and that's it forever. Although, you know, you can color your hair, so that's a bad analogy. But it's not something that you have or don't have. It's something like a practice. It's a skill. It's like learning to play the piano. You know, you have to practice because otherwise it's just not going to be there sometimes. Compassion will affect how we interact with others. As I said, you're less likely to chew somebody's head off. And if you practice that self-compassion, there's more empathy developed in you overall. So not only empathy for others, so empathy being the ability to recognize what somebody else might be feeling by trying it on yourself and getting in their paradigm and being like, yeah, I can tell what that would be like. And patience. And it makes us better equipped to support clients, colleagues, loved ones in their own challenges because you are now much more equipped to go, what might they be feeling like? That ripple effect of compassion and kindness not only enhances personal well-being, but also will strengthen your social connections. It will make you probably a nicer person to experience being around because you're going to be happier in yourself and you're not going to be berating yourself to those levels. And that creates a foundation for that collective emotional health. And where that's concerned, for sustained lifestyle changes, And going back to motivation and willpower, so many people will rely on willpower. I promise I will do my best to talk really quickly through this last section, where a lot of people rely on motivation and willpower to push them through lifestyle changes. But research shows that willpower alone is a limited resource, and it often leads again to burnout and failure. So compassion offers a better solution by providing continuous emotional support and reinforcement. So there's work by Gerner and Neff that shows that people who practice it are more likely to stick to health-related goals. And also remember, if you have health-related goals, the more you berate yourself and the more stressed and anxious you are, the more stressed you are, the more energy you need. So that is going to get your brain to go, we need more energy and we feel bad. And from previous talks, you'll know if the brain feels bad, it craves food that make it feel good. If the energy levels are low, it craves food that are quick release sugars. So when people talk about being in a slump, they're very stressed, they're very anxious, they're ruminating, they're talking pretty badly to themselves, even about the fact that they are in a slump. And they go, all I'm doing is eating. I could eat for Ireland, I could eat for the world. That's very, very normal. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything abnormal, let's say. What's happening there is your system is feeling bad and looking for serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin, dopamine, and it's looking for food that is going to trigger that, or activities, comfortable activities, usually most of the time. And then on the flip side, the lower your energy is from burnout, from being in that type of downward spiral, the more likely your brain is to crave simple carbohydrate foods. And as an addition to that, if weight loss is something that you're looking for, as I mentioned as well, high levels of cortisol, difficulty losing weight, more fat storage around the belly area. So because self-compassion motivates through kindness and support rather than fear and punishment, when we respond to setbacks with compassion, we're less likely to give up on our goals and more likely to view failure as part of the learning process. And we haven't placed a meaning making that those particular goals that we want to do, if we are imperfect, if we don't know how to do things the first time round, if we don't meet that massive expectation that we've set on ourselves, we're going to feel bad. And the system, as I said, is going to go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to even get into it. And from a neurological perspective, compassion-based practices enhance your neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to form new habits. So regularly practicing it strengthens neural pathways associated with emotional resilience and reduces the likelihood of falling into old self-defeating patterns. It's always difficult to rewire something at the start. And that's what I was saying. If you're somebody that's allergic to being self-compassionate, just try it. Try it for a few days. Write things down for yourself into a little journal for yourself. It's really uniquely effective for long-term positive psychological changes because it fosters all of the things that we spoke about. And unlike willpower, which will fade and diminish and kind of ebbs and flows depending on whatever's happening in your life, stressors, energy, etc., compassion grows the more that we actually practice it. So by creating a supportive internal environment, we're way more likely to take risks, positive risks, learn from mistakes, and persist through challenges. So it doesn't just feel good, it works. And there's studies over and time again. There's a lovely book by Carol Dweck on mindset. Yes, that she goes into this. I've forgotten what I was going to say there. So from a mental health perspective, it's going to help you live better, feel better, have better health, better immune function, better cognitive function, better relationships, better all of the above. So that's me for today. I've absolutely not run over time. Hey, so that's it on self-compassion. If you've any questions or comments, would love to hear them. Otherwise, Andrew will be back with you guys next week. And I hope that you find something nice to say to yourself today. Yeah. Have a good rest of your week. I always put the banner up for this. Sorry about that. And we will chat to you guys next time. If I had my glasses on, now I'd be doing great. Yeah.